She was refilling a water glass when it happened. Right there in the middle of the most expensive restaurant in San Francisco, a man worth $4 billion pointed at her and laughed. Not a polite laugh, not even an uncomfortable one, the kind that fills a room, that turns heads, that makes the other waitstaff freeze mid-step. "Hey, gentlemen," he announced to his table of investors, loud enough for half the dining room to hear. "I want you to pay attention to this woman. This is what happens when you don't apply yourself in school." A ripple of uneasy laughter. A few people looked away. One woman stared at her silverware. Her name was Dr. Naomi Adeyemi, and she said nothing. Not yet. 11 stories above the bay, Meridian was the kind of restaurant where the menu had no prices, where the lighting was engineered to make wealthy people look even wealthier, where the sommelier wore a tie that cost more than most people's rent. Naomi had worked here for 8 months, Tuesday and Friday evenings, Saturday lunch. She took the job because it fit around her schedule at the university and because the tips were extraordinary. To the other staff, she was simply Naomi, quiet, precise, never flustered even during the chaos of a fully booked Saturday. She folded napkins with the same calm attention she gave to everything else. She remembered dietary restrictions without writing them down. She had a way of disappearing into a room while somehow making every guest feel personally attended to. Nobody asked her where she went on the mornings she didn't work. Nobody asked about the conference badges sometimes visible in her coat pocket. Nobody asked why she occasionally received calls mid-shift in languages that weren't English. She never offered. That wasn't her way. The man who had just humiliated her was named Clifford Vance, founder of Vance Meridian Capital, no relation to the restaurant, and a fixture in tech circles known as much for his contempt as for his returns. He had the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been wrong in a room where it mattered. He had made his money in predictive analytics. He believed deeply that he could read people within 30 seconds. He was proud of this. He said so often. Tonight, he had brought 4 prospective investors to dinner and was performing for them the way he always performed, loudly, sharply, at someone else's expense. Naomi returned to table 7 with the amuse-bouche course. She set each plate with the same quiet efficiency. "Tell me something," Vance said, leaning back in his chair, a glass of Barolo balanced in his fingers. "What did you study? Or, let me guess, you didn't?" One of his guests shifted uncomfortably. Another pretended to check his phone. Naomi looked at him, calm, direct, not hostile. "I'm happy to take your entree orders whenever you're ready," she said. Vance smiled like she'd confirmed something. "See, that's what I mean," he continued, turning back to his guests. "No ambition, just coasting. I built my first company at 22. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, eating ramen, but I had drive. Some people just don't have it." He tapped the side of his head. "It's up here. You either have it or you don't." The table nearest them had gone quiet. 2 women dining together exchanged a glance. A man in his 60s watched Vance with an expression that was difficult to read. Naomi stayed where she was. She did not smile the way she was trained to smile. She did not deflect or apologize. She simply waited, the way you wait for a storm to pass, knowing it will. It was the man in his 60s who spoke first. His name was Dr. Reinhard Moeller. He was the director of the Global Science Policy Institute in Geneva and was in San Francisco for a 2-day symposium. He was not a man who raised his voice. He never needed to. "Forgive me," he said, addressing Naomi. "Are you Dr. Adeyemi from the Lagos MIT Climate Consortium?" The room shifted, one of those invisible atmospheric changes, like pressure dropping before rain. Naomi turned to him, and for the first time all evening, she smiled fully. "Dr. Moeller, yes. I didn't recognize you without the conference lanyard." He laughed, genuinely delighted. "I saw your paper last year, the one on adaptive water modeling and sub-Saharan drought projections. I assigned it to my graduate seminar." He paused. "I told them it was one of the most significant pieces of climate research published in the last decade." Clifford Vance's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. One of his investors, a woman named Priya, who ran a mid-size fund in Palo Alto, leaned forward almost imperceptibly. "Wait," Priya said quietly, "the Adeyemi model? The one the UN cited in the 2031 framework?" "The same," Dr. Moeller said. He looked at Naomi with something close to reverence. "You hold 2 doctorates, yes? Environmental systems and applied mathematics?" "3, technically. I finished the policy one last spring. It felt like cheating at that point. I'd already done most of the coursework." Silence. Not the polite social silence of people waiting for someone to finish a sentence, the kind of silence that falls when a room collectively realizes it has misread something fundamental. Clifford Vance set his glass down. He was not a man who recalibrated easily. His entire identity was built on the premise that he saw things clearly when others did not. To be wrong, publicly, in front of investors, was not something he had a script for. So he did what people with fragile certainty often do. He pressed harder. "Okay, so you studied. Academic credentials are one thing. Real-world application is another. Anybody can write a paper. I'd like to hear what you actually think about the carbon capture investment space, since you're apparently the expert." It was meant to be a trap, an invitation to stumble in front of his money. Priya looked at him with something that was not quite admiration. Naomi did not hesitate. "The carbon capture space is overcapitalized in the wrong technologies," she said. "The investments chasing direct air capture at industrial scale are running about 15 years ahead of the materials science. The efficiency curves don't support the return timelines most funds are projecting. The actual opportunity, if you're looking at a 7 to 10-year horizon, is in enhanced weathering and coastal blue carbon integration. We published a cost-benefit analysis on this 14 months ago. The UN Environment Program distributed it to member states in March." She paused. "But I'm happy to get your dessert order first if you'd prefer." No one laughed, not because it wasn't funny, because the room was processing something too quickly to respond. One of Vance's other investors, a quiet man from Boston who'd said almost nothing all evening, leaned toward his colleague and murmured something. Vance sat very still. His face was doing something complicated, the architecture of a man who has spent years building a persona and has just watched the first brick come loose. "Why," one of the investors finally said, looking at Naomi with open curiosity, "are you working here?" She glanced at Dr. Moeller, who smiled as if he already knew the answer. "My youngest brother is finishing his degree. He's the first in my family after me. I cover his tuition gap on weekends." She straightened slightly. "The work isn't beneath me. Nothing honest is." The room was completely still. Later, Priya would look up Naomi's publication record on her phone at the table. 47 peer-reviewed papers, 3 monographs, fellowship citations from institutions on 4 continents. She'd find the UN brief, the congressional testimony Naomi had given the previous year on drought-driven migration, the honorary degree from Uppsala received 6 months ago. She would find the interview Naomi had given to a science journal, where, asked how she managed such an unusual career path, Naomi had said, "I learned early that you can't always control the rooms you're in. You can only control whether you leave them better than you found them." Priya would share all of this to the table. Clifford Vance did not look at his phone. Before the evening ended, Priya asked for Naomi's card. So did the man from Boston. So, quietly, did Dr. Moeller, who mentioned that the Institute was forming a new advisory panel and had been struggling to find the right chair. Clifford Vance left a 20% tip in cash, the precise obligatory minimum, and said nothing to Naomi on the way out. But in the elevator, one of his investors turned to him and said calmly and without particular emphasis, "I think I need to reconsider the partnership, Cliff. I don't do business with people I can't trust to read a room." The doors closed. He entered that restaurant as the most powerful person in it. He left, having lost more than the evening. 6 weeks later, Naomi stepped down from her shifts at Meridian. Her brother had received a scholarship, one of 3 Priya's fund contributed to annually at Naomi's recommendation. She took the chair at the Institute's new advisory panel. She flew to Geneva in October and sat at a table with ministers and scientists and people who had spent their whole careers trying to be in exactly the kind of room she walked into every day. And at the opening dinner, a quiet, elegant affair at a hotel overlooking Lake Geneva, she folded her own napkin with the same careful attention she gave to everything. "Old habits," she told Dr. Moeller, who smiled. "No," he said, "character." Here is what Clifford Vance never understood, and what people like him rarely do. Dignity is not something that can be assigned by a job title. Intelligence is not something that announces itself in the first 30 seconds. The person bringing your water may have mapped the future of the world's water supply, and the most dangerous assumption you will ever make is that invisibility means insignificance. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to The Story Room, because every week we find the people history overlooked and make sure the world finally sees them.